the case of Carrie Farver. Carrie Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. As a single mother, she raised her son, Max Maxwell, after experiencing failed relationships in the past. Raising Max was challenging for Carrie. Despite her immense love for her child, she struggled with depression, which led to a period where she spent a month in bed. During this time, her mother, Nancy Rainey, took care of Max. Carrie's difficult relationship with Max's father and unstable living conditions contributed to her mental health issues. At the age of 20, Carrie's struggles led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This condition causes extreme mood swings ranging from euphoria, increased productivity, and excessive friendliness to depression, bitterness, and feelings of powerlessness. Although bipolar disorder significantly complicates daily life, Carrie's doctor found an effective treatment for her in the early 2000s. With this treatment, Carrie was able to manage her condition and live a relatively normal life. Whether Carrie wanted to settle her personal life is an open question. On one hand, what woman doesn't dream of a suitable partner? On the other hand, why commit to someone who might bring worries and misfortunes? Carrie was raised in a loving family and had an active lifestyle. She played sports and aspired to become a doctor. However, her dreams were cut short during her first medical practice when she fainted at the sight of blood. Deciding not to risk her health or her patients, she pursued a career in programming instead. In the fall of 2012, Carrie received a job offer in Omaha with good prospects and decided to take it. However, her son Max was in middle school and preferred to stay in his familiar surroundings, so he remained with his grandmother in Macedonia. According to Amy, a friend of Carrie's father, Carrie had a radiant smile that drew attention whenever she entered a room. It was likely this quality that caught Dave Kropa's eye when they met at an auto repair shop in November 2012. As Carrie showed him something inside her car, a Ford Explorer, Dave felt an instant attraction. Their first date arrived soon after, but their time together was interrupted by numerous calls and messages from a woman named Liz, who eventually stopped by Dave's apartment to collect something she had left there earlier. Dave told Carrie about his past relationship with Liz, whom he met on a dating site 6 months prior. They had been together for a while, but he ended things because she was extremely clingy. Carrie was understanding and wasn't fazed by Liz's presence in Dave's apartment, recognizing that everyone has past relationships that can resurface. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie started dating Dave. They had discussed their expectations beforehand and agreed to a brief, casual affair. Liz, whose full name is Shauna Elizabeth Gollier, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Dave and Liz had children around the same age. However, Dave felt Liz wasn't a suitable long-term partner due to her limited education and lack of shared interests. Their relationship focused more on physical intimacy than meaningful conversations. Over time, Liz grew increasingly interested in what Dave was doing when she wasn't around, particularly in regards to who he was seeing. However, Dave consistently reminded her that they were in an open relationship, implying that she shouldn't be concerned about his interactions with others. He also reassured her that she had the freedom to date other men if she chose to do so. Despite Dave's openness, Liz couldn't shake off her feelings of dissatisfaction and jealousy, particularly towards Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the close bond that persisted between Dave and Amy even after their breakup. As a result, Liz's behavior became increasingly possessive, prompting Dave to create distance between them. It was during this period of separation that Carrie entered Dave's life. Carrie was not only beautiful, but also stylish, intelligent, and a great conversationalist. Dave found himself lost in conversation with her for hours, feeling an undeniable connection as they shared common interests and perspectives. Liz noticed that Dave was becoming increasingly distant, so she tried to rekindle their connection by sending messages, emails, and making phone calls. However, he had no intention of stopping his interactions with Carrie or anyone else for her sake. Meanwhile, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together, which was convenient for Carrie's work schedule and enjoyable for Dave. Carrie seemed to be taking things lightly, focusing on having fun and not looking for anything serious. In December 2015, Liz was shot and non-fatally wounded, leading her to suspect who might be responsible and realize she needed to take action. 2 years prior, on November 13, 2012, Carrie had kissed Dave goodbye before he left for work, expecting to see him later. However, that would be the last time they saw each other. At 9:45 a.m. that morning, Dave received a surprising text message from Carrie stating she wanted to move in with him permanently. Dave found this message disconcerting as they had previously discussed and agreed not to rush into a relationship, being happy with their current situation. Dave replied that he wasn't ready for such a change, but Carrie's response was unpleasant and filled with profanity. He was shocked to discover that all of Carrie's belongings were gone from the apartment. This led him to believe she had left him for good. That same day, Carrie also removed him as a friend on Facebook, which seemed like the end of the matter. However, Dave started getting multiple rude texts and emails from Carrie daily, containing curses and threats to ruin his life. Carrie sent a large number of these messages, all of which were aggressive. Uncharacteristically, she also stopped showing up for work, despite being known for her punctuality. Strange messages weren't only sent to Dave, but also to her mother and 15-year-old son, Max. She claimed to have found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max with her, but wanted to be alone for the time being due to worries over her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie posted on Facebook that she'd left of her own free will and was tired of criticism. She wasn't missing her old life but wasn't ready to return home. Carrie asserted her independence as a grown woman, stating that she had the right to leave home if she chose to. She apologized for hurting everyone by leaving abruptly. However, as time passed, Carrie failed to reappear. Her mother became increasingly concerned when Carrie missed important family events, including her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other celebrations. The final indication that something was seriously wrong was when Carrie missed her father's funeral. Liz began receiving messages from Carrie, which were insulting, humiliating, and even threatening. Carrie warned Liz to stay away from Dave. Confused by Carrie's behavior, Liz reached out to Dave, who revealed he was facing a similar situation. Carrie was sending him messages and emails, accusing him of wrongdoing, calling him a liar, and vowing revenge for the pain he allegedly caused her. The messages were sometimes ominous, with Carrie claiming to know what Dave was doing at the moment. The shared experience brought Dave and Liz closer together, but also made Dave feel guiltier about the trouble he had caused. The messages from Carrie grew more menacing and were filled with grammatical errors and illogical content. This was unusual, as Carrie's mother claimed that her daughter had always been a calm person who wrote coherent and well-structured letters and documents. Carrie was known to be meticulous about spelling and writing style. It's possible that she had experienced even more severe mental health issues. Her actions seemed to be driven solely by her uncontrolled mental state. A key indicator of dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is the presence of separate, simultaneous self-consciousness in each ego, each with its own distinct memories, thoughts, behaviors, and inclinations towards specific actions. This might explain Carrie's unusual behavior and altered writing style. Everything suggested she was unstable, which is why the police didn't initially consider her missing, instead focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie's cell phone, but it was unsuccessful due to blocked signals. Meanwhile, Liz and Dave continued to receive hundreds of texts and emails, sometimes simultaneously receiving nasty messages when they were together. Dave and Liz continued dating, but he felt uneasy around her as she became increasingly demanding. Despite claiming to be fine with their no-commitment relationship, Liz's behavior suggested otherwise. Every time Dave tried to end things with Liz, Carrie would start texting him, bonding with him over their shared victimization. This common ground drew Dave and Carrie closer together, causing them to reunite repeatedly. In January 2013, a missing car was surprisingly found in Dave's front yard. However, the fingerprints on the steering wheel didn't match Carrie's, and the car showed no suspicious signs. The police eventually returned the car to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to message Liz and Dave, escalating her behavior by sending pictures of their children and threatening to harm them unless Dave left Liz alone. As time passed, Carrie's stalking persisted, and Liz's jealousy grew, frustrating Dave. He became exhausted with the events unfolding in his life and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. This decision came shortly after a tragic incident in August 2013 when Liz reported a fire at her home that resulted in the death of all her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz suspected Carrie was responsible, citing repeated threats made via texts and emails. The incident marked a significant turning point in the case of missing person Carrie Farver, leading to Carrie's placement on a federal wanted list. Tens of thousands of messages were meticulously analyzed. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed Dave was also in danger. Someone had vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and thrown a brick through his window. It appeared that Carrie's anger was directed at anyone in Dave's life. Consequently, Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. As Dave spent time with his children, he also saw Amy regularly. The police were perplexed as to why Carrie, who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks, was now stalking Dave and his ex-wife. The investigators decided to focus on Dave Kropa, as Carrie's disappearance raised many questions that needed to be answered. It was a mystery that didn't add up. Carrie Farver's family was also tirelessly searching for her, exploring every possible lead to find her. Their efforts finally paid off in the spring of 2015 when detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took on the case. Unfortunately, they found no evidence that Carrie was still alive. One of the detectives shared their thoughts with ABC News. "It's unusual for adults to suddenly leave without using any money. No one saw or heard from her, which doesn't make sense. She had a good income and a nice home. I've come to believe that I have no proof she's alive." With the help of a digital forensics expert, the detectives analyzed data from Kropa and Golyer's phones from 2013. They discovered that Carrie had sent over 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave in just 3 years. Whoever was impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated, trying to hide their IP address and true identity. Somebody with expertise in computer programs seemed to be behind the strange occurrences. In December 2015, Liz Golyer contacted the police again, this time reporting that she had been shot in the leg on her own doorstep. She claimed her attacker was Amy Flora, not Carrie. Coincidentally, Dave was missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. This new development raised suspicions that Amy might be involved in Carrie's disappearance. The investigation uncovered a lead that suggested Amy's motive. She may have been seeking revenge against women connected to Dave Kropa. Amy's relationship with Dave had been complicated, and the presence of other women in his life might have prevented them from reuniting. The police promptly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, she had a solid alibi. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, so no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly puzzling. New details emerged from the analysis of Liz's cell phone data. Investigators found fake email addresses using variations of Farver's name and an app used to schedule messages. This discovery shed light on how Liz and Dave received simultaneous messages from Carrie. The investigation led to suspicion of Liz Golyer, which intensified when her fingerprint matched those on Carrie's car steering wheel. It was now clear who the culprit was, and the priority was to prevent further harm. To catch Liz off guard, detectives devised a plan to create a fake narrative, pretending to still consider Amy the prime suspect, aiming to prevent Liz from escaping or destroying evidence. Liz fell for the trap. She was thrilled at the opportunity to eliminate another rival who was threatening her relationship with Dave. Soon after, Liz Golyer gave the police an email supposedly written by Amy. The email included a confession to kidnapping Carrie, along with specific details about the crime. According to the confession, Carrie had been stabbed in the stomach or chest area before her body was disposed of. The email also revealed information about Carrie's car and home that had not been publicly disclosed. According to an investigative spokeswoman, Liz provided detectives with information that only someone intimately involved in the crime could have known. In doing so, she inadvertently implicated herself in Carrie Farver's murder. The letter made it clear that the crime occurred in a car, prompting authorities to re-examine the victim's vehicle. Upon removing the seat covers and fabric, specialists discovered a blood stain belonging to Carrie Farver. Liz managed to send messages posing as Carrie without arousing suspicion, but it's unclear how. Reports suggest that Liz Gollier led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. Notably, Garrett's IP address was linked to messages sent under Carrie's name. When questioned, Garrett revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with Liz. Out of kindness, Garrett invited Liz to move in with him and his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and deteriorated significantly once they started living together. Garrett would often take care of Liz's children while she isolated herself in her room or left the house. Garrett was shocked by what the police told him. It was discovered that Liz spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be a missing woman. Although her room was messy, no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did discover several cell phones and electronic devices in the last place she stayed. In late December 2016, Shauna Liz was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor commented on the complexity of the investigation, stating that most murders are dark, but this crime was particularly bizarre. It would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Liz's actions, including letting her dog die in a fire she set herself and shooting herself in the thigh, were attempts to deflect suspicion from herself. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, believed the case against her was weak, since it was largely based on circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence were missing, including Carrie's body and the crime weapon, and Liz had not confessed to the crime. In fact, there was no conclusive proof that Carrie was even dead. The defense team requested a mistrial, which would allow a judge to determine the extent of Shauna's guilt. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of complex electronic evidence, as well as physical evidence. They argued that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car supported the theory that she had been stabbed. Investigators also found a direct link between Shauna and Carrie's murder by analyzing a memory card that Shauna had used around the time Carrie went missing. The memory card, which was found in a tablet stored at Dave's residence, contained deleted images. It was clear that the foot belonged to a person who had been deceased for several years. Notably, Carrie had a similar tattoo among her distinguishing features. Her mother later confirmed that the tattoo indeed belonged to Carrie. The photo solidified the conviction of Shauna Liz as a predator. The judge ruled her guilty of first-degree murder and handed down a life sentence without parole, stating that Carrie Farver did not disappear by choice but was tragically murdered. Authorities suspect that Shauna murdered Carrie, allowed her body to decompose, and then burned the remains to eliminate all evidence. Motivated by jealousy, she decided to eliminate her rival. After disposing of Carrie, Shauna took her cell phone and used it to send messages that would make Farver appear unstable and win back Dave's favor. When this plan succeeded, Shauna wanted to eliminate Amy as well, but she became too entangled in her own scheme and ultimately fell into her own trap. Shauna, also known as Liz, was also found guilty of arson for setting fire to her own home in August 2013 and attempting to blame it on Carrie. The fire destroyed the house and killed pets, resulting in an additional 20-year prison sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women, despite maintaining her innocence. Dave revealed that he received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he claimed that he never noticed Carrie stalking him during their relationship, which contrasts with his experience with Shauna. So what happened to Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps and became a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering data science and is now married. Although it's unlikely he's forgotten the past, he may have found some peace with his new family. As for Dave Kropa, he now lives a private life away from the public eye. He doesn't have a public account on any social media platform. This disturbing crime story is a harsh reminder of the complexities and manipulation that can occur in human relationships. It highlights how vulnerable we can be in our own surroundings, unaware of the true nature of those around us. On a cold evening in November 2021, Bobby Ann McLeod, a young woman from Plymouth, England, was waiting alone at a bus stop, intending to catch a bus to the city center to meet her friends. Dressed for a night out, She stood by the roadside, unaware of the fate that awaited her. As the minutes ticked by, the expected bus came and went, but Bobby Ann was nowhere to be found. Bobby Ann McLeod was born in 2003 in Plymouth, a lively coastal town in the southwest of England. She grew up there with her parents, Donna and Adrian McLeod, and her older brother, Lee. The McLeods were a tight-knit family, always making an effort to show each family member their personal worth and importance to the family harmony. Besides the love they shared, the parents instilled strong values in their children like responsibility and respect. This probably explains why there was no competition between the siblings for their parents' affection and attention. This situation helped Bobby and Lee forge a real sibling bond without the usual rivalry for the spotlight at home. This doesn't mean they were angels or never fought. They had their typical sibling squabbles, but their affection for each other was clear to those around them. Bobby and Lee were lucky to live in Plymouth, a place with a rich history dating back centuries, known for its monumental buildings and stunning seafront that often impress visitors. Surrounded by such a positive environment, Bobby Ann thrived, becoming a popular and cheerful person, always with a bright smile on her face. People who knew her from high school described her as a pretty girl with fair skin, long hair, not very tall, and with a delicate demeanor. Her kindness, loyalty, and willingness to help others made her a great friend to many. Like many teenagers, Bobby Ann was drawn to the rebelliousness of alternative rock and its provocative lyrics. She listened to artists and bands like Pink Floyd, Nirvana, Queen, and even the controversial rapper Eminem. Despite the loud music that challenged the norms, Bobby Ann remained the sweet girl everyone knew. She loved watching Disney movies, with Lilo and Stitch being her favorite, fascinated by the blue alien, her favorite color. At school, she was known for her artistic talent and creativity. She was always motivated and clear about what she wanted in life. One of her goals was to graduate from high school, and upon achieving that, she aimed for higher education. She entered university aspiring to become an interior designer. Around this time, she also experienced young love, starting a relationship with a local boy a year younger than her. They made a cute couple, got along well, and shared many friends. Donna and Adrian, as parents and Lee as the older brother, approved of the relationship, seeing that the young couple didn't neglect their responsibilities because of love. In fact, since they were all busy with studies during the week, they made sure to plan time together on weekends. So on Saturday, November 20th, 2021, nobody at the McLeod's home was surprised when Bobby Ann said she would go out with her boyfriend, keeping up with their routine of nurturing their romance. They had plans to meet some friends at 8 p.m. in the city center. She had to leave home well in advance to account for the travel distance and the need to catch a bus. It was around 5:45 p.m. when the young girl bid her father goodbye, told him she loved him, promised to be back at the agreed time, and left for the bus stop. She had a 4-minute walk to the nearest bus stop at the end of her street, a route she was familiar with. Between 6:05 and 6:15 p.m., some passersby spotted her standing at the stop, looking up and down the street waiting for the bus. Like any girl her age while waiting, she used her mobile phone and checked her social media. She took a selfie and posted it on her story, mentioning how cold she was feeling. At the same time, Cody Ackland, a promising musician from Plymouth, aged 24, was in the area. Little is known about Cody's early life, other than he was the son of David and Helen Ackland, born in June 1997 in Germany, where his father, a former military man, was stationed. After his parents divorced during his childhood, he lived with his mother in Plymouth, close to the bus stop where Bobby Ann was waiting. Although Cody attended the same high school as Bobby Ann, their 6-year age difference meant they likely never met there. After school, he worked various jobs, but music was his passion, leading him to become an indie rock band's lead guitarist and songwriter. To those who knew him, he was a nice guy making a name in the local music scene with no history of violence or trouble with the law. However, his bandmates noticed his tendency towards depression and a not-so-cheerful temperament, which was starkly different from his energetic stage persona. Unknown to many, he harbored interests far removed from the music world, and behind his friendly and sometimes melancholic exterior lurked a much darker side. In secret, Cody had developed a bizarre fascination with serial killers from around the world and even kept a list of dangerous individuals he admired. Among his favorites were Joseph James D'Angelo, Andre Chikatilo, Ivan Milat, Fred West, and Tommy Lynn Sells, all notorious for their heinous minds. But topping Cody's dark list was none other than Ted Bundy. This criminal had kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered about 30 women in the 1970s in the United States. After being convicted for the trail of terror he left behind, Bundy was executed in 1989. With his criminal idol in mind, Cody got into his car and, in a twist of fate that would prove deadly for Bobby, and spotted her at the bus stop. The exact details of how he approached her remain unclear, but it's likely she didn't see him as a threat due to his unassuming appearance. Taking advantage of the secluded spot, Cody struck her on the head with a hammer, the blow causing her to collapse. He tried to flee, but upon reaching his car, he noticed she was trying to get up. He returned to the scene, dragged her to his vehicle, and forcibly placed her inside despite her incapacitated state. In the McLeod family, there was a rule that whoever left home should inform the family upon reaching their destination. This simple act provided peace of mind. That's why when an hour and a half had passed since Bobby and left and Donna hadn't heard from her daughter, she started to worry. She texted to ask if Bobby and was okay and if she had reached her meeting spot with her boyfriend. With no reply from Bobby and her phone going unanswered, which was out of character, the family grew anxious. By 8 p.m., her boyfriend, who was waiting for her at their planned meetup spot, was surprised by her absence as punctuality was one of Bobby and's notable traits. As time slowly ticked by without her arrival, he, trying to remain patient, stayed put but eventually gave in to his nerves and began calling her. His worry deepened with each unanswered ring. About an hour later, he called the McLeod residence to ask if Bobby and was there. This call escalated the family's anxiety as no one knew her whereabouts and all attempts to reach her on her mobile phone had failed. Donna and Adrian couldn't just sit by idly, so they started calling Bobby and's friends one by one, only to sadly find out that no one knew where she was. Although they hoped nothing bad had happened, deep down they feared the worst. Without further delay, they went to the police and reported her missing. It was after 9 p.m. The next day, November 21st, 2021, the police launched a search operation in the area, joined by the McLeod family, friends, and volunteer neighbors. They also distributed flyers throughout the city, featuring Bobby and's photo and contact numbers for any sightings. Her disappearance was widely reported on social media and local news outlets. One of the most heartfelt appeals came from her brother, Lee, who pleaded on social media for everyone in Plymouth to help search for his little sister. He urged anyone with any information about Bobby and to come forward, as he desperately wanted her back home. The police tried to trace the young girl's path from her house to the bus stop, but found nothing noteworthy. Knowing she planned to take a bus to the city center, they inquired with the bus service to see if she had boarded any of their vehicles, but this lead quickly went nowhere. However, during interviews with locals, the police received a crucial tip from a resident who had passed by the bus stop the previous afternoon and seen Bobby, and there around the time she took her last social media photo. This confirmed that she had reached the bus stop and stayed there for some time, giving investigators a starting point. Upon searching the nearby area, officers found a pair of AirPods behind the bus shelter, later confirmed by Donna and Adrian to belong to Bobby Ann. The area around the bus stop was cordoned off with yellow tape, and the police conducted a thorough inspection, even getting on their knees to search for any potential evidence. The search extended to all nearby streets. Since Bobby Ann never boarded the bus and her AirPods were found close to the bus stop, authorities considered the possibility that she might have been abducted or attacked during a robbery attempt. Believing public involvement was crucial in gathering information to find the missing student, the authorities turned to the media, calling on anyone with even the slightest information related to the case to come forward to the nearest police station. The detective on the case provided a detailed description of the missing teenager. 18 years old, slim build with light brown shoulder-length straight hair and green eyes, wearing ear piercings. He mentioned that according to her family, she was last seen wearing a gray sweater, black ripped jeans, fishnet stockings, and light-colored sneakers. He also directed a message to Bobby and herself, urging her to contact the police if she heard the appeal. He emphasized that she wasn't in trouble. They just needed to know she was safe. Another task for the investigators was to track her mobile phone, which led them to the city's outskirts, though they couldn't pinpoint the exact location. However, luck struck that same day. A bus driver on the route near the bus stop where Bobby and vanished handed over her phone to the police. He explained that on November 20th at 7:15 p.m., a local found the phone and an empty AirPods case at the same stop used by Bobby and when a bus arrived at 7:23 p.m., the local spoke with the driver and handed over the items, assuming the owner would come looking for them. The next day, after seeing news of Bobby Ann's disappearance and her last sighting at that bus stop, the driver decided to give the found items to the police. On November 22nd, the family, police and volunteers continued searching for clues in the fields, forests and roads around Bobby Ann's area, but found nothing, growing increasingly desperate. Then on November 23, 2021, at 1:17 p.m., a voluntary witness statement at the police station significantly shifted the investigation's direction. A young, well-dressed and polite man entered the station, offering information about the missing girl, expressing his wish to assist the police and her family. The officer summoned a detective to speak with him. Unaware of the bombshell about to drop, the detective listened as the man claimed he had abducted Bobby and from the bus stop 3 days prior and had since killed her, providing details of the alleged crime. The police, skeptical of whether to believe his story or dismiss him as a fame-seeking lunatic, placed a map before the self-confessed perpetrator, asking him to pinpoint where he left Bobby Ann. While some officers still hoped the interior design student might be alive, they rushed to the indicated location. Sadly, there was no chance of rescuing Bobby Ann. The dense underbrush impeded their advance, but as they moved forward, they found a woman's unclothed body lying face down. The state of the scene and the skin's discoloration left no doubt. The woman had died days earlier. Later, the police publicly announced that after receiving a confession from a suspect and verifying its authenticity, they had discovered a woman's lifeless body on a beach about 7 miles from the bus stop where Bobby Ann was last seen. The body was found in a wooded area and the victim had yet to be identified. However, due to the height and certain physical traits, investigators strongly believed it was Bobby Ann. While awaiting official identification, they informed the McLeod family of the discovery. The suspicions were confirmed when dental records of the victim matched those of the abducted student. The confirmation that the body was indeed that of the beloved missing student sent shockwaves through the local community. The people of Plymouth, who had actively participated in the search, were shattered by the tragic end of the case. To express their grief and support for the McLeod family, residents held a vigil near the bus stop from where Bobby Ann was taken. Overwhelmed by tears and trying to stay strong, Bobby Ann's mother thanked friends in the community for their support during the search and at the vigil honoring her daughter's memory. She regretted the sad circumstances that brought them together. With a quivering voice and shaking hands surrounded by loved ones, she delivered a prepared statement highlighting the blessing it was to watch Bobby Ann grow up in their family. She mentioned that although her beloved daughter's life was taken too soon, the beautiful impact she had wherever she went would never be forgotten. Then, lifting her candle, she asked everyone to do the same in memory of her daughter, followed by a minute of silence. Lee, Bobby Ann's older brother, also shared his feelings, but he did so on social media, thanking her for the time they spent together and vowing never to forget her. He expressed how unjust it was for such a beautiful and talented girl to meet such a horrific and undeserved end. He shared a childhood photo of them smiling and happy in their primary school uniforms. In the message accompanying the photo, Lee wrote that he hoped to reunite with his beloved little sister in heaven and that it was an honor to be her big brother. He promised to forever cherish the adventures and journeys they shared and wished her eternal peace. As the community and those close to Bobby Ann were still reeling from the shock of the events, the gruesome details of the crime began to emerge, stirring a mix of grief and anger among them. The forensic report highlighted the severe injuries she sustained from a blunt object, likely a hammer, revealing she had 14 serious wounds to her head and face. Contrasting with the attack's brutality, and despite her body being found unclothed, the forensic expert found no evidence of sexual assault before her death. Media outlets then disclosed the name of the alleged perpetrator of the brutal assault that ended Bobby and McLeod's life, identifying him as 24-year-old Cody Ackland, a musician from the same town. Following the revelation of the suspect's identity, Cody's lawyer issued a statement on his behalf, claiming full responsibility for the crime. His assertion in the statement that he had never seen the young woman before the night of the incident baffled the public, leaving the motive for such a cruel and unwarranted attack a mystery. For those who knew Cody, this news was a shocking blow, as he had never been in trouble before. However, as the investigation delved into Cody's computer, phone, and other belongings seized along with his car, they uncovered chilling aspects of his life that no one knew. Investigators found over 3,000 images on the supposedly quiet musician's phone, revealing a sinister side unknown to all. Many of these images resembled scenes from horror movies due to their disturbing and dark nature. His browsing history also showed that in the days and weeks leading up to the young woman's abduction, Cody had been researching the most heinous acts committed by serial criminals, as well as remote locations and potential weapons. In the hours before the young girl's abduction, Cody visited the website of an online sports store browsing through baseball bats and waterproof clothing. For the investigators, the unfolding evidence seemed almost unbelievable, as Cody had been a complete unknown to them before he walked into the station with his horrific confession. He had appeared so normal that he had never attracted police attention or been involved in any trouble before. The investigators theorized that on the day of the crime, Cody succumbed to his secret desire to emulate the serial killers he idolized, leading him to commit a serious offense. They believed Bobby and was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, her life tragically ending due to a stranger's urge to act on his dark criminal instincts. They speculated that if Bobby hadn't crossed his path, Cody might have targeted anyone else, regardless of age or gender, with his sole intent being to take a life, not necessarily to commit sexual assault. In the midst of the turmoil caused by the crime and its disturbing details, the band Cody was part of, which had recorded its first disc in August of the same year, announced on social media their decision to disband immediately. They stated that ending the band, for which Cody was the guitarist and songwriter, was an act of respect for the deceased teenager. They expressed shock over the tragedy and difficulty in coming to terms with what had happened, extending their thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of the university student who were devastated by her loss. Finally, on November 26, 2021, Cody appeared before the court charged with murder. In the brief hearing, he was seen wearing a gray cotton sweater and a blue mask adhering to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic health measures. He spoke only to confirm his name, address, and date of birth. The presiding magistrate informed him that he would be held in custody and face trial at the Crown Court in Plymouth. Cody was scheduled to appear at the court for a preliminary hearing to address all matters related to the case before proceeding to the actual trial. It was during the pre-trial hearings that the full extent of the horror unleashed on the day Bobby and Cody's paths tragically crossed was revealed. Bobby arrived at the bus shelter around 6:15 p.m. At that time, Cody, driving his Ford Fiesta, spotted her at the stop. He noted a slight resemblance between Bobby and his ex-girlfriend, but he clarified that his actions were not triggered by emotional reasons or the resemblance. Instead, he had been seeking a victim to fulfill his long-standing plans. Bobby, a design student, seemed the perfect target for him, so he parked on the road behind the bus stop. After stopping, he watched not only her, but also the surroundings to ensure no one else was around. Then he quietly approached her with a hammer he had brought along and struck her twice on the head. Believing the blows were fatal, he returned to his car to escape, but to his astonishment, he saw that Bobby was not only alive, but also trying to get up from the ground. Faced with this unforeseen situation, Cody went back to the bus stop, dragged her away, and somehow managed to get her into his vehicle. He then drove her to a secluded parking area about 7 miles away. It was around 7:45 p.m. when he stopped in the midst of a wooded area, intending to dispose of the body there. What had already occurred to the innocent young woman was tragic enough, but the worst was yet to unfold. The most painful and chilling part of the story began at this point. Cody recounted that when he attempted to leave the body, he realized Bobby and was still alive and conscious. Despite having the opportunity to repent and seek help or take her to a hospital for medical care, Cody chose not to deviate from his original plan. He decided to remove her from the car. And at that moment, despite being attacked by him, the defenseless young woman expressed her fear to him. Cody told her he was scared too because he had never done anything like this before. Then he attacked her with the hammer, striking her 12 times in the head. He immediately set about destroying evidence, starting with burning her handbag in the woods. When he returned to where Bobby and lay, he was, in his words, both surprised and impressed because she was still alive, making some sounds. Admitting he admired her resilience, he said he then ended her suffering by suffocating her. Next, he placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove about 30 miles, where he hid the body after undressing her and removing her jewelry. Around 10 p.m., Cody returned home and went straight to bed. The next day, he threw the hammer into a river and disposed of a bag containing the blood-stained clothes of both him and Bobby and at some orchards. On November 21st, while the McLeods, police and their community were frantically searching for the young woman, Cody was out enjoying himself. He went to a pizzeria with friends, attended a band rehearsal, and spent most of the night in a local bar. Witnesses called to testify noted that Cody seemed unusually cheerful that day, even making jokes and hugging friends. The defendant recounted that on November 22nd, he continued enjoying himself, buying sweets and going to the movies while keeping up with the latest news and massive search efforts for Bobby and on his phone. However, the initial euphoria of having fulfilled his dark fantasies gradually faded. On November 23rd, Cody went to his job at a car service company where he worked as a valet. The morning was uneventful, but after his lunch break, he made an unexpected turn. Cody messaged his bandmates telling them he loved them and they might not see each other for a while. He also sent a message to his mother expressing his love. Then he went to the police station and confessed to the crime. During the police statements at the hearings, it was made clear that in addition to Cody's confession, there were numerous pieces of physical evidence collected from various locations he visited after the crime. Investigators found the victim's DNA in Cody's Ford Fiesta and on sneakers recovered at his house. As for the motive behind the crime, the detective who led the investigation noted that the suspected perpetrator refused to elaborate on his reasons. Despite attempts to get answers, Cody consistently avoided questions about why he took Bobby Ann's life. He recalled that after surrendering, Cody told the police that the crime hadn't been on his mind, as it felt as surreal as a movie or fantasy. He later admitted he couldn't fully grasp his feelings about having taken someone's life, suggesting it felt like someone else had committed the act. Concerning Cody's mental state, a psychiatrist evaluating his fitness to stand trial uncovered a significant detail. The accused confessed to the specialist that the depressive feelings he had experienced throughout his life vanished after he killed the university student, and he no longer felt the same level of resentment as before. With all the case-related evidence presented during the pretrial hearings, the trial proceeded in a Crown Court between April and May 2022. In the courtroom, Cody's lawyer acknowledged that while psychiatrists found his client did not have a mental illness, he had endured significant emotional difficulties throughout his life. He mentioned that Cody was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, and anxiety from an early age, and had battled depression for at least 7 years. He also pointed out that Cody had received little consolation or emotional support at home and found none during his school years. Regarding a father figure or other male role models, he stated that Cody had never experienced anything positive, which in his view explained Cody's admiration for negative male figures. In contrast, the prosecution pointed out Cody's obsession with serial killers, particularly Ted Bundy, noting the deliberate choice of a hammer as a weapon, mirroring the preference of his top-ranked criminal idol. During the sentencing hearing, the judge characterized Cody as highly dangerous, emphasizing that his interest in serial killers extended beyond morbid fascination. He highlighted the loss of Bobby Ann McLeod's potential life, describing her murder as brutal and savage, and stated that the crime not only caused outrage, but also instilled fear across the region, for which Cody must also bear responsibility. The prosecutor depicted Cody as leading a double life, driven by a pathological desire to emulate serial killers. He called for a severe sentence for the prolonged and frenzied attack against a petite, defenseless young woman who expressed fear during her ordeal. The prosecution presented a victim impact statement from the McLeod family, portraying Bobby and as a beautiful and bright young woman full of future plans, brutally stolen from them. They expressed that life without her was unbearable, and while acknowledging no sentence could match the severity of the crime, demanded the full extent of legal retribution. The defense attorney, on the other hand, argued for mitigation, citing Cody's voluntary surrender and confession, which provided the McLeod family with some closure and knowledge of their daughter's fate. When delivering the sentence, the judge addressed Cody directly, stating he had brutally ended the life of a wonderful young woman after a prolonged torment. He sentenced Cody to life imprisonment, setting a minimum term of 31 years before eligibility for parole. 6 months after the tragic day, her life was extinguished. The time came to bid farewell to Bobby and McLeod. The profound impact of her case on the community and the genuine affection of the locals for the friendly and beautiful young woman and her family were once again evident. On May 26, 2022, the day of the interior design student's funeral, hundreds lined the streets of Plymouth to pay tribute as the procession passed through the city center. The hearse, covered with a blanket and plush figures of her favorite childhood characters, Lilo and Stitch, was drawn by a horse-drawn carriage. At the funeral, Bobby and's favorite music, alternative rock, played, and many attendees wore band t-shirts and black jeans as a nod to the beloved young woman. Out of respect, they avoided wearing ripped jeans, the fashion she donned on the day she was attacked. One of the most touching moments was when people left flowers and balloons at a memorial bench near the bus stop, where the attack and abduction occurred. Cody's obsession with one of the most notorious serial killers of the 20th century led him to commit the unthinkable. His crime shattered a family and community still mourning the loss of the delightful young woman he killed. Case of Anna Repkina. Anna Alexieva Repkina, a charming and outgoing woman from Chelyabinsk, Russia, hailed from a good family. With a strong work ethic, passion for travel, rock music and cats, she owned several. Anna was a vibrant individual. She loved capturing life's precious moments through photography and valued romantic relationships deeply. Her ultimate goal was to find true love, settle down, have children and build a happy family. Anna's remarkable sense of humor made her a delight to be around, something her friends and acquaintances often highlighted. However, her life took a dramatic turn in 2016, when a high school sweetheart of 7 years ended their relationship, leaving her devastated. Despite this heartbreak, Anna refused to give up on her dreams. She took the initiative to try online dating, determined to find her ideal partner. On a Russian dating site, she came across a promising match who seemed to possess all the qualities she was looking for. Met a charming young man named William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. What drew her to him was his fascination with Russian culture, but more importantly, his adoration for her. William consistently showed kindness to Anna, often complimenting her and making an effort to be present for her whenever she needed him. Despite the physical distance between them, those who knew him described William as a charismatic and passionate person with a great sense of humor who inspired those around him to chase their dreams. As they developed their online relationship over several months, their bond grew stronger. They seemed perfectly suited for each other, sharing similar tastes in music and a love for live performances, as well as a similar sense of humor. Friends who knew them noted that Anna and William complemented each other beautifully. William's caring nature was evident in his thoughtful gestures, such as sending Anna flowers despite being separated by oceans. Anna and William's online chemistry was undeniable, but they wanted to confirm their connection in person. So in December 2016, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to spend the Christmas holidays with William. However, she initially made a mistake and booked a ticket to Portland, Maine instead of Portland, Oregon. Before realizing the error, she had already flown to Maine, but she was determined to make it work. After fixing her flight issues, Anna finally arrived in Oregon. William picked her up from the airport and they spent the next 10 days together. He took her on sightseeing trips, and they enjoyed activities like visiting the seaside, playing in the snow, and cuddling by the fire. William also introduced her to his friends, and they celebrated New Year's Eve together, sharing a romantic kiss at midnight. It was the perfect Christmas experience for Anna. After a whirlwind 10-day visit, William popped the question to Anna using his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was leading a double life. During their time together, he had also been secretly seeing his 33-year-old landlady, Michelle Chavez, behind her back. William rented a room in Michelle's house, and it seemed he also held a special place in her heart. Michelle was married with 2 children, but this didn't deter her romantic involvement with William. Their affair had been ongoing for over a year when Anna, William's girlfriend, visited Michelle's home. Unbeknownst to Anna, she was meeting her rival, as Michelle was her boyfriend's landlady. Michelle showed understanding when William brought Anna to her home, perhaps thinking William would never leave her or believing Anna was insignificant, much like her own husband. Whatever the reason, Michelle didn't expose their secret. It wasn't until Michelle discovered the engagement ring that her husband's stance on the situation became clear to everyone involved. Meanwhile, returned to Russia, unaware of the drama she had left behind. After posting a photo of her engagement ring on Facebook, the social media algorithm brought the post to Michelle's attention. Michelle's anger wasn't solely due to William's engagement to another woman. Michelle planned to leave her husband to be with William, and as a symbol of her commitment, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. However, she soon discovered that the ring was identical to the engagement ring William had given to Anna. It turned out that William had given Anna Michelle's own wedding ring, which had been recycled. Michelle confronted William about this, and he tried to calm her down, insisting that Anna meant nothing to him and promising to break off their engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, had packed her bags, including her wedding dress, and had quit her job, ready to start a new life with William in another part of the world. Michelle was unhappy about this development. Anna's mother, Yelena, also had reservations about her daughter's hasty decision. She was unsure about William, whom Anna barely knew, and thought she was rushing into things. Anna, however, was convinced that she was in love and saw no reason to wait. Yelena finally released Michelle from her grasp. Michelle, realizing Anna's visit was not a social call, grew angry. She demanded that William find another place to live, refusing to let the engaged couple stay under her roof. William complied, renting an apartment for himself and Anna. However, he continued to secretly see Michelle, sneaking out to visit her and reassuring her of his commitment to her, downplaying Anna's importance. Michelle became increasingly worried about William's growing relationship with Anna, so she took action. She contacted Anna on Facebook, revealing everything about her and William's ongoing affair. Anna reported the conversation to William, but he dismissed it as Michelle's jealousy. Anna believed him, and the couple decided to ignore Michelle's warnings and focus on their future together. They set a wedding date for March 23rd and planned a beachside ceremony. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home. They planned to try to get married again in April. On that same day, surveillance footage captured the couple buying food at a McDonald's drive-thru. Anna sat in the passenger seat, still wearing her wedding dress. William had told her that the officiant was sick, but that was a lie. Despite claiming he didn't love Anna, William had kept her convinced that he wasn't invested in their relationship. However, had grown tired of William's manipulation. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum: choose between her and Anna. Michelle made it clear that if Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action, build a snowman, a sinister phrase meaning to kill someone, and hide their body in a snowy area where it would never be found. After issuing her threat, Michelle lost contact with William and assumed he had chosen Anna over her. She left him voicemails to express her feelings. On Sunday, April 16th, William phoned Michelle to share the news that he was single again, having just ended his tumultuous relationship with Anna, who was now headed back to Russia. Coincidentally, William had hit a deer with his car and was waiting at the Isla Martile store for repairs. He asked Michelle to meet him there. As it was Easter Sunday, Michelle was attending a family gathering, but she excused herself to join William. When she arrived, they reconnected by having an intimate moment in William's car, reaffirming their strong connection. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in the forest. Initially, investigators didn't know her identity, as there was no identification found with her body, and she had only been in the state for about a month. The crime scene lacked a murder weapon, but was littered with trash. However, amidst the debris, a clear plastic bag caught their attention. Inside, they found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken paper bag. The KFC receipt turned out to be the crucial clue in solving the case. It contained a date, time, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he was best friends with William and had been getting to know Anna. He also shared a tradition with William where they would eat lunch at KFC every Friday. The receipt, it turned out, was from a purchase made about a week before Kevin's questioning. The investigation into Anna's death led to the discovery of William's deceitful behavior. In his interview, Kevin revealed that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to clear his head. However, William never returned the weapon. The police began to suspect William and Michelle after hearing Kevin's following Anna's death. William's behavior became increasingly unusual and suspicious. He withdrew money from Anna's bank account to pay off his debts and was caught on camera buying cigars and Star Wars Legos at various stores. William also confided in Kevin that he was spending money recklessly to cope with his emotions. Furthermore, he began researching time travel and even reached out to strangers on WhatsApp, offering to exchange his soul for the opportunity to go back in time. William wanted to travel back in time to April 16th to prevent a situation caused by his best friend's mistake. However, on that day, William was seen crying in a store employee's arms, claiming his girlfriend had just broken up with him. He had moved back in with Michelle, but was picked up by the police and questioned. The police asked William about his whereabouts on April 16th, and he said he was on a drive with Michelle. When asked about Anna, he denied having a romantic relationship with her, saying they had only gone on 2 dates and he had ended things. According to William, their last interaction was in mid-March, when Anna mistakenly posted their engagement on Facebook, causing trouble with Michelle. When questioned about the trash found near his late fiancée or the woman he dated, William admitted to littering, but claimed it was just KFC trash and a can from the general store, not related to Anna's death. About 40 miles separated the ALP general store from the logging road. However, the investigators did not believe William's alibi. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators, quickly increased the pressure by revealing that William's trash had been discovered near a murder victim at a different location. Initially, William reacted with surprise and heartbreak, feigning disbelief that he was being questioned about a murder. 2 days after Anna Rapina's body was found, her fiancé William Hargrove was arrested for her murder on April 19th. During the investigation, was also questioned about her whereabouts on April 16th, the day Anna was killed. At first, Michelle stuck to a rehearsed alibi, claiming she and William had spent the day together, with William picking her up from her mother's house and going on a drive. However, Michelle later changed her story, admitting she had lied initially. She then claimed that she and William had planned to meet up, but he never called or showed up. When the police revealed that William was in custody for murder, Michelle's response was surprisingly calm, saying only, "Okay." The investigator pressed Michelle on her lack of emotion, which eventually broke down, and she tearfully attributed her initial calm to being in shock. William Hargrove was indicted on charges of murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft in June 2018. His trial began in October 2019, with the prosecution seeking the maximum penalties for each charge, while the defense argued for a more lenient sentence. William's defenders claimed he was innocent and that Melissa, the spurned lover, was the true culprit. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against William, backed by evidence and motive. The evidence showed that William was torn between 2 lovers, with Anna pressuring him to make a choice. There were records of William and Anna driving together in an alone car. On the day of Anna's murder, William's cell phone was tracked to the logging road at 4:30 p.m. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with his fingerprints being the only ones on the weapon. Despite denying any involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to go shopping and pay off his car insurance. He was even filmed withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. The prosecution argued that William had driven Anna to the forest, gotten her out of the car, and then executed her with his shotgun. The prosecution claimed that William was faced with a choice between Anna and Michelle, leading to his actions. In contrast, the defense argued that their client was innocent. According to the prosecution, the evidence pointed to Melissa as the perpetrator. A threat from Melissa to build a snowman with Anna, her cell phone found near the logging road, and Anna's cell phone discovered in Melissa's house suggested that Melissa had planned the crime. Melissa, who was not charged with any crimes, testified as a witness for the prosecution. She revealed that she worked as a late-night cab driver and was married to an Oregon State University instructor, but their marriage was loveless and open. She met William at a bar where he worked and, with her husband's permission, began a romantic relationship with him. As they grew closer, William rented a room in her house. When Anna entered the picture, Melissa was not threatened, having a similar open relationship with William. Melissa explained that by her second visit, she couldn't tolerate the situation anymore, especially when she saw her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although she had given William an ultimatum, she had no role in William's actions that hurt Anna. Melissa clarified that she never intended for Anna to get hurt or killed. She denied the defense's allegations, stating that the threat about building a snowman was just a joke, a light-hearted family comment, even if it was a bit extreme. She acknowledged that her cell phone was found in the forest, but William was the one who drove her there. She didn't know why or what he planned. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned. As his partner, she naturally held onto it for him. Melissa's testimony lasted 14 hours, and she was not the only one. Around 70 other people testified, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, some of Melissa's family members, and others. Throughout the case, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, particularly in her hometown in Oregon, where she was criticized and ostracized by the locals. Michelle had reached a low point and attempted suicide, but fortunately it was unsuccessful. The prosecutor praised Michelle's efforts to take responsibility, calling her actions tough and super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours and returned with a decision. Despite the defense's efforts, they couldn't find Michelle guilty of Anna's death. There was no physical evidence linking Michelle to the crime scene or the weapon used. In fact, she had a solid alibi. She was celebrating Easter at her mother's house, and multiple witnesses could vouch for her presence. On the other hand, William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence against him led to his conviction on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Anna's attorney announced plans to appeal the verdict. Notably, the jurors developed a strong connection with each other during the trial. After the trial, they visited the logging trail, where Anna's life was tragically cut short, to pay their respects to her memory. Anna will be remembered as a courageous young woman who left her home in Russia to build a new life in the United States. Anna was a loving person who openly shared her love with others. She was cherished by many during her lifetime, and her memory will continue to be loved and honored. The prosecutor, Amy Matsuko, stated, "The sadness and ordeal for Michaela Ortega's family began on April 23, 2016. On that day, the 12-year-old girl left her house. Lured by a criminal who had deceived her by hiding behind a fake Facebook profile, she never returned. After the mandatory missing person report was filed, multiple searches and operations were conducted to find her, all with the same result, negative. The case quickly grabbed media attention. As days went by, the anguish grew. A month had passed, and the search continued aimlessly until the most unexpected thing happened. Michaela Ortega was born on August 4, 2003, in Bahia Blanca, a port city in the southwest of Buenos Aires province, Argentina. She was the beloved daughter of Monica and Claudio Ortega, who had previously welcomed Brian, her older brother. Michaela, affectionately known as Mika by her loved ones, brought immense joy to Monica and Claudio. She was the apple of her father's eye, and to her, he was like a hero. As it happens sometimes, Claudio and Monica decided to part ways, but they remained on friendly terms, ensuring that the kids always had their father's support and presence. While attending school, Michaela struck up a friendship with Ornella, the daughter of Guadalupe Albacete. Their bond solidified after a school trip. As they prepared for high school, a significant transition, both friends still viewed the world with the innocence of childhood. Michaela dreamt of becoming a veterinarian or a special education teacher, showing a deep love for animals and children with disabilities. She also had a natural ability to serve others, a trait that became evident when Ornella had to use a wheelchair after an operation. Michaela was always eager to help, bringing joy to challenging situations, often with jokes and laughter. She did everything with enthusiasm and was very expressive. However, as she approached her teens, Monica noticed changes in Michaela's personality. Her taste in music, language, and surprising demands, like wanting tattoos and going out alone, bewildered her. Despite their attempts to seek professional guidance from the school, Michaela's volatile temperament led to daily arguments over trivial matters, from breakfast choices to what she should wear. The best times were when Michaela's sweet nature shone through, warming her mother's heart. Claudio, her father, took her to and from school daily. At 12, she only hung out with a few school friends and occasionally with girls from her skating group. A defining trait of Michaela during this time was her strong will to be respected and valued. During the 2016 carnivals, she met Axel and they started a sweet, innocent friendship. Claudio knew of him but hadn't met him. Around the same time, Michaela received a strange friend request on a social network from someone posing as a young girl her age, who was actually a 26-year-old man named Jonathan Luna, born around 1990. Jonathan was sentenced for a serious theft and was locked up in General Roca prison. He was also under investigation for abuse charges. Despite being known as a dangerous man, the judge of the case authorized a temporary release for him in December 2014. Jonathan seized this opportunity to escape. From that point on, there was a warrant out for his arrest, but he was never found. After a while, Jonathan settled down in Bahia Blanca. He lived in a rather rundown house and started a relationship with Maria Eliana Espinoza, a Chilean woman in her 50s. While she worked as a domestic worker, Jonathan spent most of his day glued to his cell phone, browsing social media and idling away in bed. On a popular social network, he managed more than 4 accounts posing as a woman. Collectively, he had more than 1,700 contacts, and 95% of them were girls Michaela's age. His preference for minors led him to form a face-to-face friendship with a 15-year-old neighbor who would visit his house to drink, mate, and chat. Even though he got along better with Maria, he frequently mentioned that he was in love with the teenager, brazenly stating his wish to have intimacy with her. Michaela, unaware of his true nature, started a virtual friendship with this sinister figure, thinking he was another girl her age. Using his charm, Jonathan slowly gained her trust. Around mid-April 2016, an argument with her mother persuaded Michaela to think about leaving home. When Jonathan found out he saw the perfect chance to meet her, he convinced her that a cousin of his fake online friend could pick her up and bring her to his house. On Friday, April 22, 2016, after expressing her love to her mom, Michaela retreated to her bedroom. Unaware of the true situation and believing her daughter was asleep, Monica had no idea that Michaela was writing a farewell letter. In it, Michaela asked for forgiveness and urged her family not to look for her, explaining she was heading to a friend's house on Saturday morning. The next day, April 23rd, after leaving the letter on her bed next to a stuffed toy, Michaela prepared to leave. Michaela left with just her ID and a hair straightener in her bag. A neighbor spotted her walking alone around 4:15 a.m., and a teacher saw her a few streets down later. Not long after, security cameras captured Jonathan with the girl. It was later revealed that he walked her for about 6 miles to a remote and hard-to-reach area where he tried to abuse her. Michaela fought back with all her strength, which enraged her attacker. He then assaulted her violently, ultimately taking her life. Before fleeing, he stole his victim's belongings. Monica woke up oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded. But soon, the harsh reality hit her as she realized her daughter was missing, filling her with unprecedented panic. Given Michaela's careful attention to her appearance, it didn't surprise Monica that the hair straightener was gone. But the absence of her ID was unusual since Michaela always left it at home. The letter, undoubtedly in her daughter's style, hinted at something more behind her disappearance. Monica sensed a connection to someone in her daughter's recent behavior, suggesting an older person was involved, possibly holding her against her will. Meanwhile, Jonathan returned home, disturbed and wet. When Maria asked what happened, he admitted to making a serious mistake. The parents immediately reported Michaela missing, prompting swift action from the authorities and community solidarity, with extensive searches and operations underway. Yet none were successful. The case quickly captured media attention and public concern, while Monica, guided by a mother's intuition, believed her daughter hadn't left the city. Jonathan closely followed the news, demanding silence in the house to listen better, and even callously remarked that the young girl had brought her fate upon herself using insults. As days passed, the anguish grew and the lack of resources for the search became apparent. At one point, they ran out of funds to make color copies of Michaela's photo for distribution. During this darkest time, Monica saw how some individuals went above and beyond, even using their own money to help find her daughter. 13 days after the disappearance, security camera footage emerged. Monica recognized her little girl with her pink backpack and Mickey Mouse sweater and immediately dismissed the idea of her daughter's boyfriend being involved. The footage was quickly broadcast on TV, where Maria recognized Jonathan and confronted him, but his threats silenced her from contacting the authorities. In the same month, Michaela's mother received a call from a young girl pretending to be her daughter, claiming she was sick and needed money sent to her, promising to return home if she complied. Sensing the scam, Monica tracked down the address and confronted the minor's parents, who dismissed it as a harmless prank, adding frustration and despair to Monica's ordeal. The police interviewed the young girl. Meanwhile, Michaela's mother tirelessly scoured her daughter's social media profiles, convinced that tracing her contacts and conversations was the key to finding her. But all efforts seemed fruitless. Jonathan tried to sell the hair straightener he had stolen from Michaela to a 15-year-old neighbor. As the search remained directionless a month later, Michaela's community and loved ones organized a candlelit march, praying for her safe return. Soon after, a woman advised Monica to seek help from a renowned dog handler specializing in search and rescue missions. Feeling this was the right approach, Monica planned to travel nearly 200 miles where he worked with the local police. By the third week of May, Monica decided to make the journey and request the dog handler's assistance. He, along with 2 colleagues and a bloodhound named Duke, joined the search. Their advanced techniques allowed them to track people after significant time had passed. Around the same time, crucial information was provided by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a US-based non-profit organization combating sexual crimes against children and child exploitation. This led to the discovery of Jonathan's contact with Michaela and his criminal background. The dog handler and his dog examined Michaela's room, using a recently used Band-Aid and hair from her comb to get a scent trace, carefully preserved for the search. The bloodhound followed the trail from her house, leading to a bus stop captured on the first surveillance camera. After a break, the dog continued, tracing the path to a second location where Michaela was seen with an individual. This marked a significant moment for the team as Duke covered about 3 miles following the scent, and after resting, proceeded towards a railway area. As night began to fall, the search team decided to pause their efforts, planning to resume the next day. Meanwhile, investigators cross-referenced data and approached Maria, who willingly provided crucial information. This led to a search warrant for her home. The news that the key suspect in the disappearance lived locally angered neighbors who attempted to set the house on fire. though it wasn't completely destroyed. Inside the house, police found the hair straightener, cell phones, and other items belonging to Michaela, which the search dog confirmed. Jonathan was arrested when he realized there was no escape and that the evidence against him was overwhelming. He confessed to the crime and revealed where he had hidden the body. On May 28, 2016, law enforcement, family members, the dog handler, and his dog, Duke, headed towards the indicated area, close to the train tracks. Duke led them about 10 kilometers, passing through abandoned train cars and waterlogged areas, and then into a field, reaching a bushy, grassy area near a gas company. Here, Duke indicated a specific spot. Despite some initial confusion due to Duke's erratic movements, including crossing barbed wire fences, the dog eventually led them to a very steep area and became very excited. The team followed, and there they discovered Michaela's lifeless body. Despite the grief, Monica was immensely grateful to the dog handler and Duke for bringing closure to their ordeal. While it was a grim reality, it ended the uncertainty that had plagued her. Michaela had been found not as hoped, but now she could be laid to rest properly. Meanwhile, everyone in the city demanded life imprisonment for Jonathan as they awaited the preliminary autopsy report. Jonathan was transferred from the police station to the district attorney's office, but refused to testify, causing a delay in the legal process. He was later moved to prison. The prosecutor had 15 days to file charges and request pretrial detention due to the case's severity. On May 30th, 2016, Michaela was finally laid to rest. The funeral procession was attended by many, marked by tears for the loss and applause for the joy she brought during her short life. Her remains were buried in the municipal cemetery. Since then, her mother has led the charge on the case with remarkable determination. Jonathan was charged with homicide, including concealing attempted sexual abuse and aggravated theft, as well as premeditated murder and femicide. Additionally, the prosecutor included the crime of grooming or cyberbullying, defined in the Argentine Penal Code since November 2013 as using electronic communications to contact a minor for committing any sexual offense against them. Given the severity of the crimes, Jonathan could face life imprisonment. Due to social network privacy, authorities could only access Jonathan's interactions with Michaela, leading the prosecutor to suspect he might have tried to entrap other girls similarly. Monica actively sought tougher laws against cyberstalking and advocated for official preventive campaigns with national and provincial reach. In August 2016, just before Michaela's 13th birthday, she chained herself to the National Congress's doors to voice her demands and prevent similar tragedies. The protests gained support from different organizations, which had also been pushing for the criminalization of producing and distributing child sexual material online in Argentina. They emphasized the urgent need for awareness of the risks associated with internet use, highlighting the real individuals behind each screen and device, not all with good intentions. Monica's persistence paid off, and within 48 hours, she and the NGO members met with then Argentine vice president. Meanwhile, Jonathan's defense lawyer indicated that he wouldn't seek acquittal, but would challenge the legal framing of the charges. After over a year, the trial began in October 2017. On the first day, Jonathan arrived in the courtroom with a helmet, bulletproof vest, and escorted by 8 prison officers. He faced insults from the victims' family members, demanding he face them and vowing revenge. Monica tried to calm her relatives in a moment captured on video and shared on social media. She often looked up to the sky, took deep breaths, and stayed focused on Jonathan, who barely showed any reaction. Sitting before the judges, she was determined to provide the necessary information requested by the prosecution and defense. Her testimony was understandably the most emotional and challenging to hear, as she felt that not only had she lost her daughter, but her own life had been stolen. She also blamed the judge, who had granted procedural benefits to Jonathan, believing this enabled his escape and subsequent crimes. After Monica's testimony, the defendant requested to leave the room until the closing arguments, amidst growing insults from the public gallery. Later, other family members, including Michaela's father, brother, teenage boyfriend, and the last 2 women who saw Michaela, answered questions. The court also reviewed documentary evidence, including the victim's clothing and belongings and security camera footage. On the third day, the defense argued that the accused had suffered a head injury leading to cognitive function impairment. However, the medical professionals conducting the autopsy and the psychologists and psychiatrists who examined the accused provided strong evidence that he acted systematically and was fully aware of his actions. After a week of trial, the judges unanimously ruled that Jonathan Luna's actions against Michaela Ortega were triple aggravated homicide due to premeditation, gender violence, and concealing other crimes, as he failed to achieve his ultimate goal of committing a sexual offense alongside charges of sexual harassment, cyberstalking, and theft. Consequently, Jonathan was sentenced to life imprisonment, marking the first case of grooming leading to murder in Argentina. As a repeat offender, he would not be eligible for parole for 35 years. The verdict was met with cheers in the courtroom. Outside, visibly distressed Monica gave her first statements to the press. Her dedicated fight gave her the strength to face daily life and find meaning in her grief. For Claudio, however, as he expressed, while the verdict brought some solace during the 2017 Christmas celebrations, the outcome was bittersweet. Subsequently, the consumption of anxiolytics was made mandatory for him to cope with the tragedy. Thanks to Monica's efforts in 2020, the Mica Ortega Law was enacted, establishing a national program for the prevention and awareness of grooming or cyberbullying against girls, boys, and adolescents. Its aim is to prevent, raise awareness, and generate consciousness in the population about this issue through the responsible use of information and communication technologies, as well as the training of the community. However, 2 years later, the case made headlines again when it was revealed that in August 2022, Jonathan appeared in the legal case as Joanna. Jonathan stated that he perceived himself as a woman and has since called himself Joanna. Based on this, he was transferred not to a women's prison, but to a transgender pavilion. While acknowledging that self-perception is indeed a personal decision, the Ortega family's lawyer expressed that neither she nor Monica were informed about what was happening with the man who took Michaela's life. Regarding the possibility of Jonathan receiving a reduced sentence, if it's proven he identified as a woman at the time of the incident, the lawyer doesn't believe it's likely to succeed. She mentioned that despite undergoing various therapies and evaluations, the accused never expressed anything about his gender identity. This raised suspicions among their clients, especially Monica. They demanded to know what kind of exams were conducted, how the case was framed, and what it was based on. In front of the cameras, Monica was more direct. She expressed feeling terrible, not just for losing her daughter, but also feeling deceived by the justice system. At that point, her determination to educate more people, especially parents and children, about cyberbullying became stronger than ever. In May 2023, Jonathan formally requested to be transferred to a women's pavilion. After, another irregularity involving Jonathan surfaced. Monica publicly reported that Jonathan had a cell phone in the prison he was housed in. This information about the dangerous inmates' privileges was shared through a fake social media profile, showing not just photos but also mentioning his social media accounts and ongoing use of the phone for scams. Following Monica's complaint through her lawyer, authorities analyzed the photos and confirmed that the signal originated from inside the prison, proving that the images were real and indeed, Jonathan had a cell phone. In mid-2023, the Supreme Court declared a complaint filed by the subject's public defender inadmissible, thereby confirming Jonathan's life sentence. In media conversations, Monica mentioned that seeing so many photos of her daughter at home helps ease, even if momentarily, the unbearable pain of her absence. She believes that every change achieved over the years, every discussion, and every legislative progress owes itself to Michaela, and it's for her that she continues to stand strong. According to Monica, Michaela was a fighter who stood her ground till the end, which is why Monica wants to follow in her footsteps. She only wishes to see her again someday and hopes that her absence won't be in vain. Until that moment comes, she's convinced that behind a star, her daughter is watching over her. Case of Soni Millbrook. Soni Millbrook was born in Memphis, Tennessee, USA on February 15, 1981. She grew up in a close-knit family with 2 sisters, 3 brothers, and a large extended family, which allowed her to form a strong bond with her cousin Jenny during her teenage years. In 1998, at the age of 17, Sony became a popular student at her high school. The same year, she met Lelth Moody, a man in his 20s, and began a romantic relationship with him. Unfortunately, the relationship turned out to be abusive, and Eltha's violent behavior left visible marks on Sony's body. Despite this, they had 4 children together, 3 girls and a boy named after Elth. A year later, in 1999, Sony's mother noticed a bruise on her chest. Sony confessed that the bruise was caused by her friend, Leith, who was controlling and often tried to isolate her from her friends and family. In the same year, Sony moved into an apartment in the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis. However, her new home was soon vandalized, with furniture slashed, clothes missing, the television destroyed, food smeared on the walls, and personal hygiene products scattered everywhere, including down the stairs. On the mirror, someone had written, "Kiki loves you" in red nail polish, with Kiki being Leith's nickname. On October 31st, 2000, Sony, her cousin Pamela, and Leith went to a bar called Mirage. While they were there, Leith slapped Sony and threw a drink in her face. Sony and Pamela left the bar and sat in the car, where Sony was visibly shaken and trembling. She asked Pamela to take her home before Leith arrived. Once home, Sony locked and chained the door. An hour later, Leith showed up, yelling and banging on the door. Pamela finally got Leith to leave by threatening to call the police. After Sony calmed down, her cousin left her alone at home. However, later that evening, Pamela got a call saying that Sony was in the hospital. Somehow, Leith had managed to get into the house, and when Sony tried to end the relationship, he violently retaliated. He tore her clothes, beat her on the head, face, chest, arms, and thighs, leaving her with bruises all over her body, a loose tooth, and even temporarily losing consciousness after being choked until she passed out by Leith Moody. Not long after, Sony discovered Elth Moody's birth control pills in her apartment, and he assaulted her again. By late 2008, when Sony was 27, she was working at a Christian academy. She was a reliable employee who always arrived on time, so when she missed work or requested time off, it was usually for significant reasons. One day, she called her employer to say she couldn't come in because her face was badly bruised, and she didn't want the children to see her like that. The director allowed her to wear sunglasses inside the academy, and Sony confided in her boss about how her boyfriend had once chased her in his car, trying to force her off the road. Leith Moody's violence wasn't limited to Sony and their children. In April 2008, he was found parked in an SUV with a firearm, despite being prohibited from possessing one, as a convicted felon. He had already served 2 years in prison for theft, and another 3 for drug possession with intent to sell. On October 6, 2008, the situation between Sony and her boyfriend Leith reached a crisis point. After failing to show up at the academy, Sony sent a distressing text message to her boss at 5 p.m., stating that Leith was holding her hostage in her own home and had been beating her all day. She provided her address, prompting her boss to alert the police. 2 officers responded to the call and arrived at the residence. When they knocked on the door, it was locked from the inside, and there was no response. The fire department was called to break down the door, and upon entering the apartment, the officers saw Leith jumping out of an open window. At the back of the apartment, Sony stood in the hallway, visibly distraught and unable to speak. Her 4 children were with her, creating a heart-wrenching scene. Her face and neck were covered in bruises and scratches. Once she calmed down, Sony recounted the events that had unfolded. She and Leith had started arguing, and he had refused to let her leave the house. Sony explained that they had not answered the door earlier, because Leith had forbidden her or the children from approaching it or the windows. He had even hurt one of their children by grabbing him and had prevented her from taking him to the hospital. Sony detailed the physical and verbal abuse she had suffered at Leith's hands, including being choked with a baby blanket until she lost consciousness. When the police arrived, Leith had threatened to suffocate her again, vowing to kill her next time. Although the officers searched the area, they were unable to find Leith. Sony and her children eventually left the house in her car. 3 days after the incident, Sony applied for a restraining order against Leith, fearing for her life and wanting to prevent any further contact with him. However, she failed to attend the court hearing on October 23rd, which meant the protection order was never granted. 6 months later, on March 10, 2009, Sony and Leith were still in contact. On that day, Leith was supposed to pick up the children for a doctor's appointment, but instead, he started a fight with Sony, accusing her of having a new boyfriend. The argument quickly escalated, with Leith slapping her, pulling her hair, and yelling death threats as she tried to escape. Sony managed to break free and ran out of the apartment, with Leith chasing after her. He didn't catch her, but instead grabbed their youngest child, an infant, and drove off at high speed. A police patrol, responding to the domestic disturbance, arrived just as Leith was fleeing. The officers attempted to stop him, but he evaded them and escaped. By early 2010, Sony, then 28 years old, was studying at Southeast Tennessee Community College. Her 5th child was 9 weeks old and in fragile health, requiring her to stay home and care for him. In January, Sony and their children moved into the Budget Lodge Motel in Memphis. On the very day they moved in, their arguments were so loud that the motel staff intervened, as they were disturbing other guests. Unfortunately, peace remained elusive, as their fights continued to disturb the neighbors and the management with excessive noise. On January 22nd, a hotel security guard witnessed Leith in a highly agitated state when he arrived at high speed in Sony's car. He began shouting at her while she stood on the second-floor balcony with their children. During the heated argument, Leith threw a bag of groceries at her. The security guard intervened, telling Leith that he needed to keep the noise down and refrain from throwing objects, and that the argument should be continued inside their room. However, Leith responded by telling the guard to mind his own business, locked the car and walked away, with the guard following him to a third-floor room that was not registered under anyone's name. When the guard asked Leith to hand over any hotel keys he had, Leith surprisingly produced keys to 3 different rooms. Despite not being registered as a guest, the following day Leith, Sony, and their children moved to room 222. That evening, the night manager asked Leith to leave, which he did, but he soon returned. The confrontations persisted for a few more days until the same security guard, who had repeatedly warned them, finally asked Leith to vacate the property permanently. As Leith went to the parking lot, the receptionist attempted to calm him down, and the guard warned him not to return that night. Leith got into the car and drove away. On January 26th, Sony privately shared with Pamela that a lot was going on in her life and that she was currently staying at a motel. She hinted that she had something important to confide in Pamela and promised to get in touch if she ended up leaving the motel or if her boyfriend did. The next day began like any other, with Sony taking her younger kids to daycare and dropping off her oldest at school around 11 a.m. However, things took a turn when the housekeeping manager knocked on Sony's door, speaking to her through the window, to inform her that they needed to settle their bill or leave the hotel room. He returned several times that day, looking for a response. At around 2:30 p.m., Leith answered the door, telling the manager that his mother would be back soon with the money they owed. But when the hotel security guard checked room 222, he found it empty, with children's clothes, bags, and various items scattered all over the floor. One of the beds was neatly made, which seemed out of place given the state of the room. Later that day, Sony failed to pick up her eldest daughter from school, which was unusual. The school secretary called Christine, the child's maternal grandmother, to come and get her. Christine tried calling Sony, but there was no answer. Growing worried, she discovered that her other grandchildren were still at daycare. Convinced something was wrong, Christine asked her husband to pick up the younger kids while she went to the school. They eventually contacted the police, who arrived at the house around 10:30 p.m. and filed a missing persons report. On January 28th, the housekeeping manager re-entered room 222, which was now vacant, to collect and label the personal belongings that the previous tenants had left behind, apparently to avoid paying their bill. The room contained piles of clothing and a large trash bag, which were both taken to the storage area. After emptying the room, It was thoroughly cleaned and readied for new guests. The following day, on January 29th, James and Rhonda Sargent moved into room 222. Upon moving in, the new tenants immediately noticed a strong, unpleasant odor in the room. They attempted to mask it by burning incense, but this effort was unsuccessful. During their search for the source of the smell, they discovered that the previous tenants had also tried to hide it, as evidenced by the scented tissues they found stuck in the tiles and ceiling vents. The smell was most pronounced when someone sat on the bed. On January 29th, the Memphis Police Department's Missing Persons Unit visited the hotel to ask about Soni's whereabouts, as it was the last place she was seen. However, the officers did not search room 222. Leith was found on February 2nd at around 7 p.m. in Soni's car, which was parked at a shopping center. He was arrested for stealing the vehicle and held in police custody for 48 hours. During that time, he was questioned about Soni's disappearance. Leith said the last time he saw her was on January 26th, when they met at 7 a.m. in the hotel parking lot, went to the room, were intimate, and then went back outside. According to Leith, Soni let him take her car keys because she planned to use her social benefits and a school loan to buy a new car. However, investigators discovered that Leith had actually been staying at a different hotel, making it unlikely that he spent nights in the car, especially considering the snow during that period. On February 3rd, police found a debit card with Soni's name, along with several recent purchase receipts inside the car. On the same day, police examined the clothes that had been stored at the hotel, searching for DNA or other evidence, but they found nothing. This lack of progress added to their frustrations, and as a result, Leith had to be released due to insufficient evidence linking him to Soni's disappearance. Meanwhile, Soni's cousin and her mother had the painful task of going to the hotel to collect Soni's belongings. Soni's cousin had a terrible premonition, but unfortunately, she did not find anything to support her feelings. On February 4th, the police went to Moody's uncle's house, where they found a DVD player that had been taken from the hotel room in Soni's wallet. Moody had given these items to his cousin, who told the police that Leith had borrowed the DVD player on January 24th, saying he wanted to watch a movie. Leith was seen driving a red car that day. Later, when the cousin asked Leith why he hadn't picked up the children on January 27th, Leith avoided the question. When asked about Soni, Leith left the DVD player and wallet in a bag and quickly left the house. James and Rhonda Sargent asked to be moved from room 222 because of the constant bad smell. Since no other rooms were available, they had to move to a different hotel. However, even after the room was cleaned and the carpet was washed in early February, subsequent guests in room 222 still complained about the foul smell, which only slightly improved for a few days. Soni's family, especially her kids, were devastated by her disappearance. Their only hope was for her safe return. On February 4th, homicide detectives visited the hotel where Soni was last seen. By then, her room had been occupied and cleaned at least 3 times. The detectives didn't enter the room, but asked the staff if they had noticed anything unusual, and all said no. On February 7th, James and Rhonda, probably relatives or friends of Soni, returned to the hotel and changed rooms 3 times, including one night in room 222, which was the same room Soni had stayed in. They told the management that the rooms still smelled bad. In March, a deeper cleaning of room 222 was carried out, including the carpets, bedding, bathroom curtains, and window drapes. But to everyone's surprise, the smell didn't go away, it got stronger. The manager talked to the security guard about the issue, and during their conversation, they remembered that Soni had vanished at the end of January. The guard recalled the events from that time and suggested that the manager check room 222 for signs of blood or cleaning products. 10 minutes later, the manager returned and asked the guard to come with him. What they found was horrifying. The 2 men walked into the room to find that the manager had removed the mattress from one bed, leaving only the frame behind. The lower part of the bed frame had a built-in enclosure, which prevented the space underneath from being used as a storage area. However, when they lifted the box spring, they discovered a large empty space that could conceal anything. As they peered through the solid edges of the frame, they stumbled upon a gruesome sight, a decomposing body. They immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene shortly after. Upon inspection, the bed frame was found to have marks all over it, with 2 broken wooden areas near the headboard. A towel and a cloth bag were discovered between the legs of the body, which was dressed in a shirt, but was naked from the waist down. The autopsy conducted by the forensic team revealed that the cause of death was strangulation using a coaxial cable. The cable was wrapped around the victim's neck, under one arm, around the chest, and ended at the back. According to the forensic examiner, would have taken at least 2 to 3 minutes of continuous pressure to cause death. DNA analysis matched Sony's genetic profile, which included female markers. Additionally, male genetic material was found on 5 parts of the cable. The main theory was that Sony was already dead when she was reported missing, and that Leith had used the coaxial cable from the DVD player he had borrowed from his cousin, suggesting premeditation. Leith was detained by the police shortly after, although not for the discovery of Sony's body. He was arrested on a separate charge of possessing a firearm, despite a prior felony conviction. Despite this, he was considered a person of interest at the time of his arrest, as he was the last person seen with Sony alive. Furthermore, he was found in Sony's car when he was arrested and taken to the detention facility in Mason on March 18th. The police have launched an internal investigation to find out why the case took such an unusual turn. They acknowledged that the family deserved answers and explained that despite their eagerness to solve the case, the officers had taken a wrong turn that led them away from the room. The police also stated that they had never dealt with a situation like this before, saying that the discovery was more astonishing than fiction, and highlighted the tragedy of domestic violence. However, they regretted that the room had been cleaned and rented out multiple times since Sony's death, which made it difficult for them to collect evidence. Rhonda, one of the first tenants to occupy the room where Sony's body was found, expressed skepticism about the police explanation when she spoke to the media. She pointed out that if the officers had asked to enter the room during their January visit, she and her husband would have let them in. Rhonda argued that unlike her and her husband, the officers should have been able to recognize the smell of a decomposing body and found Sony much sooner. Finally, the time arrived to bid a loving and dignified farewell to Sony. On March 24th, her funeral took place. Following her death, Sony's children were placed in the care of her sister and brother-in-law. By April 1st, they had begun the process of obtaining legal guardianship of the children. She acknowledged that while the children were the primary victims of the tragedy, the lives of all family members were severely disrupted. She vowed that although she couldn't bring her sister back, she was resolute in providing for Sony's children, ensuring they received the necessities like food, clothing, and toys, and keeping them together as a family unit. Sony had benefited from a social program that refilled her debit card for grocery purchases on a regular basis. Shortly before her disappearance, the card was replenished as part of her tax refund. The police were able to track the card's movements, which led them to Leith, who was found with the card. Their investigation showed that the card was used on February 1st, for days after Sony went missing. At a convenience store she regularly visited on the 1st of each month to withdraw cash using her electronic benefit transfer card. The police visited the store and asked the owner to share the footage from the 16 security cameras. The surveillance system had captured footage of a man wearing yellow clothing using Sony's card at 11:38 a.m. on February 1st. He bought a bottle of orange juice, withdrew some cash, and purchased a cigar. After making the purchases, the man returned to a car driven by another person. In February 2014, nearly 4.5 years after the crime, Leith's trial finally began. By this time, the Budget Lodge hotel where the couple had stayed had closed down. Leith maintained his innocence, while the prosecutor described the events as a tragic and ugly culmination of a tumultuous relationship. In contrast, the defense attorney highlighted the lack of concrete evidence, including witnesses and physical proof, and disputed the prosecution's speculations. The defense attorney brought to attention a crucial piece of evidence, a fingerprint found on the bed frame that did not belong to Leith, suggesting the possibility of an alternate perpetrator. He also mentioned that Sony had been involved with other men in the past, which could have led to her murder. The attorney emphasized that Leith had no prior arrests for domestic violence against Sony. Furthermore, He revealed that Sony had moved back in with Leith due to a rat infestation at a relative's house where she was previously staying. On February 6th, a video was shown in court which captured Leith using a prepaid Sony card just 4 days after the murder. While the defense team suggested that Leith's calm behavior during the transaction suggested he was innocent, the prosecution saw it as a sign of a cold-blooded and ruthless individual who was unbothered by the crime he had allegedly committed. On February 7th, 2014, Leith was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. 3 days later, on February 10th, Leith appealed the sentence, arguing that the court had made an error by considering his past history of domestic violence, and that the evidence presented was insufficient. However, on July 7, 2015, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction, confirming the sentence. Isla Belle Reynolds was born April 4, 2010 to Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro. On the night of December 16, 2011, Isla was with her father at his home at 29 Violet Avenue in Waterville, Maine. He lived with his mother, his sister, and his sister's infant daughter. But that night, Justin's mother wasn't home and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and her son were staying over. Justin would put 20-month-old Isla to bed at 8 p.m. This was the last time she was ever seen again. The night she went missing, there were 3 adults in the small home: Justin, his sister, and his girlfriend. Justin called the police at 8:50 the next morning to report her missing. Investigators found Isla's blood in multiple places in the DiPietro's home, including her first-floor bedroom and his basement bedroom, which is where he slept that night with his girlfriend and her child. His sister and his sister's child slept on the first floor. In late fall 2011, Isla's mother Trista decided voluntarily to enter treatment for substance abuse. Before entering the rehab program, Trista arranged for her sister to take care of Isla with the help of Trista's mother. But Justin's family contacted DHS and claimed that Isla was supposed to be in his care, though there was never a formal custody arrangement. Without a home visit, Isla was removed from her aunt and grandmother's care and instead placed in Justin's home that he shared with his mother and sister. A home visit would have been standard procedure, but this crucial step was skipped according to Trista and her family. The representative from DHS who placed Isla in the DiPietro home was a woman named Karen who was related to Justin's mother Phoebe. Trista had reasons for keeping Isla out of the DiPietro house. She felt that Isla wasn't safe there. Although the pair had been voluntarily co-parenting Isla, she started coming home to Trista with unexplained bruises. When Trista asked what happened, Justin said there was an incident in the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese, but Trista knew Chuck E. Cheese didn't have a ball pit. One time, Isla's arm was broken while in Justin's care. He claimed she sustained the injury when he was carrying her into the house, and his arm slipped, causing him to fall on top of her. Justin never sought medical treatment for Isla's injury, and later she had to be placed in a soft cast to heal. Knowing her daughter was in Justin's home, Trista checked herself out of the treatment program and tried to get Isla back, but the DiPietro family refused. When she called to speak to Isla on the phone, Justin and his family made excuses as to why she was unavailable at the moment. Trista stated that she received text messages from him stating that she would never get Isla back. Trista filed for full custody of Isla on December 15th, and Justin called to report her missing the morning of December 17th. In April 2012, police found some unspecified items of interest behind the Hathaway Creative Center in the Kennebec River, about a mile from the DiPietro's home. In May 2012, nearly 6 months after Isla vanished, authorities publicly stated they believed she was dead, but did not believe she had been abducted. Investigators found several drops of Isla's blood on her car seat strap in Justin's vehicle, and her dried vomit was found on the back seat. Drops of her blood were also found on her slippers, the sofa, her baby doll, a fan cord, a plastic tote in the basement, and also on a sheet found inside the tote. On Justin's sneakers, his mattress and sheets, the cement floor and wall beside his bed, and a pallet in the basement. When investigators showed him the blood, he had no reaction. He also told Trista that it was no big deal. He said he had no idea what happened that night, and she must have been abducted, and stated it was just a normal night. Strangely, he also took out a life insurance policy on Isla weeks before she disappeared. In December 2018, 7 years after her disappearance, Trista filed a wrongful death suit against Justin. Although the suit seeks unspecified monetary damages, she stated the real goal of it was to get answers as to what happened to Isla and to recover her body. In his response to Trista's filing, Justin said he was innocent of any wrongdoing in Isla's disappearance and the blood in his house was from one time when she was sick. Authorities maintain that he has not been cooperative with the investigation and they believe the adults who were in the home that night are withholding information. Surprisingly, no one has been named as a suspect in Isla's disappearance, and she remains missing and her case remains unsolved. On December 7, 1985, Armand and Lorraine Peltier led their Siberian husky named Paka outside their home in Frenchville, Maine, right across the river from Canada. At some point in the early morning hours, a woman delivered a full-term baby girl on a gravel pit access road near the intersection of US Route 1 and Peltier Avenue in Frenchville and then drove or was driven away, leaving the infant behind as temperatures were well below zero. Mr. Peltier said that not long after letting their dog out, she came back and kept pounding at the door's window to get back in. He said he went to go look and could not believe what he saw. He would say he thought it was a rag doll at first, but then he realized it was actually a newborn baby. Mrs. Peltier remembers a cute little girl with reddish blonde hair that they were later told weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. The baby had very recently died and still had the umbilical cord attached, although police did not know if the baby was born alive. When authorities arrived on the scene, they found a large amount of blood, placenta, and boot prints. An autopsy was performed and the cause of death was listed as exposure. It was 30 degrees below zero the night before and officials said she could not have lived more than 30 minutes in that temperature. The Peltiers believed the cries of the infant or its scent led Paka right to her and said Paka carried her so carefully by her head right to our back steps. In 1985, investigators told the Peltiers that any wounds caused by Paka in no way contributed to the baby's death. Sheriff James Midori said there were some wounds in her head, but they were completely superficial and he noted the dog did nothing to hurt the little baby. An officer at the scene said a vehicle must have driven in because of the tracks found in the snow. He also said there was frozen blood found in the snow along with footprints and near those were the dog tracks. He said he turned and followed the dog's tracks right to the house where it had dropped the baby by the door. The gravel pit was not far off the road, and so the baby must have been abandoned in the middle of the night, or as the officer noted, the person would have been in plain view. The vehicle was determined to be small in size, and the mother of the baby was suspected to be from Canada. The media were telling people to be on the lookout for people shopping for items that could be used to control heavy bleeding. Police questioned a couple who had been spotted in a local department store around the time of the incident. The woman reportedly had blood on her pants and was acting distressed. Police immediately released a composite sketch of the couple to the media. The couple were Canadian and came forward and explained that she had gotten her period and were quickly ruled out as the suspects. Other than a description of a small car based on tire tracks found at the scene, police have very little evidence and the trail went cold. The Peltiers said they could never have children and would have loved to adopt the baby Jane Doe if she had survived. They were very saddened that the mother had left the baby in the snow instead of leaving her on their doorstep. The Peltiers moved to Bangor in the summer of 1986 and Paka lived to be 12 years old before dying of cancer in 1987. This baby is known in the Doe Network and Namas as the Rustock County baby Jane Doe, but no composite sketch of the baby exists. The case remains open and is still under investigation and as of today remains unsolved. Robert Joyo was born January 13, 1980 and was nicknamed Rob. He was described as a goofball that loved to make people smile. He enjoyed football and horseback riding in Cape Cod where he was born. Around his sophomore year of high school, his grades began to slip and so his coaches removed him from the football team and told him to get his grades up. Football had been incredibly important in his life and without it, he began to struggle to find purpose. That's when he found himself getting into more and more trouble. At some point during all of this, his family decided to move away from the large city of Houston, Texas to the more isolated town of Gorham, Maine. Rob would go from a very large school in Houston to a much smaller school in Gorham with very cliquish groups. With Rob being 18 and only having a couple months left of high school, he would get in an apartment on April 3, 1998 in Portland, Maine with his friend Andre. That same day, he would go with his father to buy a Ford Bronco that he found. Earlier that day, Rob played basketball with his younger brother, Mark, for a few hours. His mom bought several bags of groceries for Rob, and when he drove away that day, nobody knew that his first night of freedom would actually be his last. He never even got to spend one night in his new apartment. That night, Rob dropped off his car and belongings at his new apartment and went out with his friends to the Metropolis Dance Club on Forest Avenue in Portland, a popular under-21 club. While at the club, his friend Michael got into an argument with another group of young men. It was bad enough that his girlfriend Monique suggested that they needed to leave as she had heard the other group was looking to fight. Rob and his friends hopped into a van and drove to the 24-hour Denny's on Congress Street where the crowds always went to after the club closed. When Rob and Michael and the rest of their group made it to Denny's around 1 a.m., they found 3 cars of guys waiting for them in the parking lot. While Rob and the others waited in the van, his friend Michael got out of the vehicle and was met by a guy named PT suddenly. Someone from behind PT lunged forward and punched Michael, who dropped to the ground and slid under the van. Rob and the other passengers got out of the vehicle to help, only to find themselves surrounded by dozens of people. Rob ended up fighting with an 18-year-old professed gang member named Kevin Janasco. Rob and his other friends got pulled apart, and they were all engaged in their own isolated fights in the parking lot. Most of Rob's friends scattered. Some even ran away from the scene, but Rob was left trying to fight off several people. Sometime during the commotion, Rob's shirt was pulled up over his head and then he was stabbed. When the sound of police could be heard, the crowd dispersed, leaving Rob lying on the ground bleeding to death. By the time police arrived, he had lost way too much blood and was pronounced dead at the scene. Although nearly 100 people scattered, there was still about 50 people nearby, but no one came forward as an eyewitness to who stabbed and killed him. The initial police investigation included interviews of about 60 people, and they were able to piece together some of the details of the evening, but details were still murky. The police discovered that the rival group was either affiliated with or full-fledged members of the Southeast Asian and Cambodian gang called the Tiny Rascals. An investigation revealed that in the first car, a red Mustang, was 15-year-old Siha Srey, Sam Kim, Tana Ork, and Siha's brother. In the second car, a blue compact, was PT Kevin Janasco and at least 3 other people. And finally, a dark Toyota car within Massachusetts plates was driven by Sam Kim's brother and had 3 guys with him from Boston, and the vehicle they were driving had weapons in its trunk. The knife that killed Rob was left behind in the parking lot and fingerprints were pulled from it, but investigators could not definitively link them to anyone. That same night, PT, along with Kevin Janasco, who fled the scene in PT's car, was taken into custody for questioning. Rob's blood was all over PT's jacket, but they were both released the following day. The other cars with the Kim brothers, Siha's Ray, the men from Boston, and Tana Ork fled the scene and hid in one of the brothers within 2 days of Rob's murder. A suspect started to emerge. A 15-year-old girl came to the Portland police station with her parents to talk to them about a phone call she received after Rob's death. She said that she was talking to 15-year-old Siha Srey, and he confessed to her over the phone that he had stabbed Rob after somebody used racial slurs against him and his friends. Siha initially told police that he wasn't even at Denny's that night. However, another witness, one of Siha's friends, came forward and said that Siha asked him to be his alibi to back up the lie he told police. At age 15, Siha was charged with the murder and spent 18 months behind bars, but he was released after investigators felt there wasn't enough evidence for a conviction. Several years later, Siha was shot and killed in a dispute over drug money. Rob's brother Mark claims he and the police heard several credible accounts that indicate Siha was not the killer, and he likely took the fall for someone else. Rob's family is asking witnesses to come forward and finally tell the truth about what happened the night Rob died. But as of today, this case remains unsolved. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.